This episode of the Cult Pop Show podcast was brought to you by our Patreon. If you want to tell us which films we should watch, get up to 2 extra exclusive podcasts a month, give us something to talk about in the post-credit scene at the end of each episode, or join us for our monthly movie club Zoom call where we discuss a film together, then please consider joining the cult and donating at www.patreon.com/cultpopshow.
Richard, you goddamn dirty ape. How are you?
I'm good.
We're recording this a little bit earlier than we usually do, which is very exciting because I'm getting on a plane tomorrow and then we're going to be in the same city for about 24 hours and then you got to go.
And then I'm getting on a plane and leaving the city.
So I'm going to be in your city I'm going to be up shit creek without a Richard.
Nice.
Thank you.
That's a good reference there.
Thank you so much.
What are we here to talk about today?
Well, we're here to talk about a film franchise because this is film franchise Fortnights on the Cult Pop Show podcast.
Of course.
This is a podcast we've been doing for a long time now, and if you don't know how it works, if this is your first time, which it could be, this is a relatively, if you've only just heard of the podcast and you're looking for an episode to dive into, I could expect this would be a good entry-level one. So what this is that this is film franchise Fortnights, where every fortnight we watch an entire film franchise and then we get together to discuss that franchise on this little podcast, and sometimes we have to split it up across multiple weeks, which we usually try to do not by amount.
Too big.
Yeah, but we don't usually split them up by like even numbers. We split them up by like what feels right, which is why, as we're about to find out,
numbers.
Yeah, as we're about to find out why we're doing Planet of the Apes as 6 and 3 are the
6 and 3. Yeah. It's funny going with I could have just said odd numbers.
Right.
But I decided to go with wacky instead.
What is an odd number if not wacky?
Exactly. I should probably soundproof this room a little bit more. I'm hearing it now.
Okay, well you can do that now.
I'm going to.
Alright, he's back. He's got a blanket over top him. It feels like we're in a sleepover and we're telling each other secrets under the blanket.
Yeah, I have 2 blankets that I normally soundproof my room with.
Yeah.
I cannot find either of them.
Well, it's very loose fitting. Make sure it doesn't brush the microphone.
Yeah.
That'd be my only comment. But I'm also only looking at a very specific perspective of this through the Zoom window. So maybe it's not as bad where you are.
If you were to see this in real life, you'd be like, he's got it.
That's professional.
By God, he's nailed it. Yeah, essentially I have, what I've done is I've got a dressing gown and I've draped it over my head and over the computer.
And I can't
screen.
I can't see you. I can't see your face.
I can't see the screen. All right. We're here today to talk about Planet of the Apes. As you mentioned, I think, which is a oh fucking hell. This is so dumb.
I don't think this is going to work.
It's not going to. It's objectively not going to work.
Okay.
Let's get through at least one movie with good audio, and then people will be hooked.
All right.
So, Planet of the Apes, what we're talking about today is the original series of films, which is the 5 films, Planet of the Apes, Beneath the Planet of the Apes, Escape from the Planet of the Apes, Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, Battle for the Planet of the Apes, and we're also going to be discussing Tim Burton's remake, which is just called Planet of the Apes.
And you might think that that's a strange order. Why not do Tim Burton's with the other sort of reboots or remakes next week?
Yeah.
And the reason for that is that the trilogy of Rise, Dawn, War sort of feel like their own thing, and it didn't feel right to talk about them distilled down with Tim Burton's film.
That's the thing. It's such a pure trilogy, and we don't get those pure trilogies, although there is a 4th one being planned.
Spoilers.
What can you do? Okay, so Planet of the Apes came out in 1968. What is it about?
All right, it is about a space shuttle that has a few people on it, and they've been sent into space, and something like 300 years has supposedly passed, and then they land on this mysterious planet.
What creatures is it inhabited by?
It's inhabited by apes, yeah. So they've been in hypersleep. So for them, they've barely aged, like maybe 6 months, but the rest of the world and human history has gone on without them. And they crash.
You say the rest of the world, but it's a different world.
Of course, it's a different world.
It's a whole different planet of apes.
Yeah, where apes are the kind of dominant species on this planet, and eventually Charlton Heston's Taylor is the only human who's kept alive, and it's sort of the story about how he convinces these two chimpanzees that he's, an intelligent being.
He's a good dude.
Whilst the rest of the ape community, which is mainly made up of gorillas and orangutans, refuse to believe it. Why I mentioned chimpanzees. So chimpanzees, gorillas, and orangutans make up the society.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
And they eventually he escapes and sort of forms a bond with the two main chimps, while also defeating the snide and proud Dr. Zaius, who's an orangutan, and decides that he's going to gallop off on a horse find his own destiny off on the planet, away from being imprisoned by the apes.
Away from the apes.
Only to discover, Richard, in a plot twist that I had no idea about, and I'm sure spoilers for Planet of the Apes, because this is a big deal.
This will ruin the film.
It turns out that it was Earth all along. He finds the remnants of the Statue of Liberty, surmising that man did, in fact, destroy itself in the future.
Yeah. And did you know that's actually not the intended message of the film? The filmmakers actually, when they made that ending, they just thought like, oh, it'd be funny if they had a statue as well. But then test audiences were like, oh, so you meant it was Earth? And they were like, oh, yeah.
They had it, but it's not a statue of an ape.
No, that didn't happen at all.
I
made that up.
I will say, I was going to say, it's very, feels like very, like...
It's a very stupid thing to say, Richard.
Not a stupid thing, but like, it feels very much intended. You got to take this dressing gown down, man. This is freaking me out. This is giving me anxiety.
You, the audience, are now hooked.
I will say this. I was kidding when I said I'd never heard of this ending. Obviously, it's one of the most well-publicized movie twists of all time.
Yeah,
especially because
it's the DVD cover of the episode of the movie.
It's such a well-known twist that it's pretty hard to actually watch this movie without looking through it. Like to watch this movie and not know it was Earth all along. It sounds so foreign to me. What a concept. But I will say this. Until watching it this time, I had always thought that the implication was that the apes blew up the planet.
Right.
And that the statement, you maniacs, you blew it up, god damn you to hell, he was talking to the apes. He's saying, you goddamn apes, you blew up humanity.
Interesting.
But it's not, because the whole idea is like, and it's very 60s sci-fi, I mean, very 2020 sci-fi as well, I guess, which is like, this is...
I think it's just sci-fi.
Yeah, like, just that like foreboding, like, humans will be the death of themselves kind of thing.
For sure. Yeah, a fun thing about that, so you mentioned the line, the famous, like, they blew it up!
Yeah.
God damn you! And so obviously this was in the late 60s, 1968 this came out. And, this was back when, swearing was a little bit on screen. And so the saying goddamn is like... And the censors, like they had to successfully argue to the censors that he's not using the Lord's name in vain. He's actually asking God to damn them.
Yeah.
Which is so funny.
Well, he is, though. I would
exactly,
argue that that's true, yeah.
Yeah, but it's so funny nowadays to be like, no, he literally means that. It's like, oh, fuck you. No, he's actually saying, like, have sex with you. even though with the MPAA you have to argue it the other way.
Yeah, exactly. Earlier in the film he says, get your hands off me, you damn dirty ape. So that's also
Well, it's more about the God damn you to hell is more about the blasphemy rather than the use of damn.
Damn is still in the camp of blasphemy, though. I'm not arguing with you.
Sure.
I'm arguing with the 60s censorship board.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm for this episode as well. I'm going to crack open a bottle of wine.
Okay. Planet of the bloody good times over here.
Planet of the grapes.
Planet of the grapes, of course.
It was fucking right there.
I was like, no word relevant to wine will rhyme with ape. Don't even try. Oh man. Had you seen Planet of the Apes before?
I haven't seen the movie, but I'm bloody living on the planet of grapes right now.
I'll bet. I can tell. I'm over here living on the planet of the japes because I'm laughing at you.
I hadn't seen this movie before. It's weird. I was actually thinking the other day because I hadn't seen this movie before, but since watching it, I'm now like, had I seen that before, or is a week ago my earliest memory of it?
Or did I just see this on The Simpsons?
Yeah. Yeah, I hadn't seen it before. And it was cool watching it because there's obviously, aside from the twist, there's other stuff that like the name Dr. Zaius, from The Simpsons, and also the get your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape.
Yeah.
Which is one of those things that, because it's one of those like classic lines they bring back in other iterations of the film.
Yeah.
But it's so powerful that first time, and it's one of those ones that, in context, you're like, "Oh, this is why it stood the test of time."
Because it's the first thing he's spoken to ape public at large. Yeah, absolutely.
Because his throat's like wounded, and he's mute for a good portion of the film, and the apes just assume he's some other
slightly more intelligent human that can't.
Obviously doesn't have the power of speech. Come on, and then, he's being jostled by the apes, and he says, "Get your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape." And that's actually like the, oh, fuck kind of moment.
Fucking powerful. I'd never seen this before. The only apes media I think I had properly seen, and
is MVP
I have now. Was Dawn of the Planet of the Apes was the only one I properly
not
sat
even
through.
Rise.
Haven't seen. At least 4 or 5 of these films we'll be talking about over the next 2 weeks. I've been in the room while they've been on, but I've never like Dawn's the only one. My friend worked at the cinema and he got me in for free, and I was like, sure, I'll go see the sequel to this sequel trilogy I don't know anything about. We'll talk more about that next week. But yeah, the Planet of the Apes. When did it come out? 1968.
68.
Yep.
1 year before the moon landing.
Yeah, and in one of the sequels, they mention the moon landing as this historical landmark.
Yeah, they're like, and the biggest piece of news since the moon landing, which happened like 2 years earlier.
So this is one of those movies where it's like, it is such a fucking cornerstone of your pop cultural upbringing that it kind of feels like you've seen it. I've seen the Statue of Liberty thing parodied countless of times, and like I said, it's probably the most widely publicized film twist in film history. I don't think anyone's going to get mad at you for spoiling that, because it's so obvious. Well, not obvious, but
it's funny because also just coincidentally a few weeks ago I watched Soylent Green, which is another Charlton Heston movie, which the twist of it is more famous than the film itself.
I haven't seen the film, but I know the twist. Yeah,
exactly.
I kind of went into Planet of the Apes thinking like, this could be one of those 60s movies we watch where I'm like, look, I get it, it's just not for me. But it wasn't.
Look, it was the 60s, baby.
It was one of those 60s movies that I was like, this is fucking great. And I was surprised outside of the twist and the "get your paws off me" line, how much I didn't really know about the film. I didn't know that a lot of it is like this courtroom drama. I didn't know that a lot of it is essentially a very early, well, I guess mid 20th century critique on like the separation of church and state. Like, had no idea that's essentially what this movie's message is. It's
obviously all these racial undertones.
Yeah,
as well.
for sure. And I loved it. The the part that I didn't know, and it was almost cooler than the Statue of Liberty twist, is the way that Charlton Heston Taylor, the way he proves to Dr. Zaius that humans were once intelligent and that apes actually evolved into humans, is they find an archaeological dig that proves that humans were around before, and there's a little doll there, and Dr. Zaius is like, whatever, it doesn't actually mean anything, we give child apes dolls of humans as well. And then one of the more primitive humans is playing with it, and it goes, and that's the smoking gun. Is why would an ape make a human doll that can talk? And I was like, that's great. What a brilliant way to prove your argument there, And I thought that was so good. I thought Charlton Heston was incredible in it, and then 5 days later found out that apparently not my kind of guy, so feeling very conflicted on that right now. But no, I like 5 stars for me. This is one of those 5-star movies for me. I just thought this was so good.
I mean, yeah, and I'm someone who gives out 5 stars like they're candy in the whole world of babies, and I just give it to them. It's taking it,
and you're the sugar terrorist that's determined on giving every baby cavities.
But yes, I gave this 4.5 stars. Just didn't quite do it for me, mate.
No, that's a shame.
No, it was a good movie, but I did feel it dragged in places, but in classic 1968 cinema kind of ways, it's not like I have anything massive to knock the film on. It's just like, oh yeah, product of its time a little bit.
2 hours long, or over 2 hours long.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the makeup in this film, what did you think of the way the apes are made up?
I think that it's interesting because it works in this one. It works in this one because I am not given any other context. I am told this is what the apes look like at this point in the future. And in my brain, I can go, well, first of all,
they're not actually apes.
First of all, I don't.
But that's it, right? They're not actually supposed to look like what we know as apes today.
They've evolved to look like this, basically.
Yeah.
This is what apes look like in the future. And on top of that, theoretically, you're supposed to watch this movie thinking it's another planet. So maybe this is what apes look like on that planet, because it is a very valiant effort in terms of makeup, and I sincerely mean that. It's great. They're very clearly still humans, and their lips don't really articulate the words they're saying, but their mouths still bob up and down when they're talking. And it's like,
the mouth, the mouth flap is funny, isn't it?
Yeah. So it worked for me in this because I at no point was told that I'm supposed to see these as how every other ape looks. Whereas the sequels make a sharp turn, a mistake, I think, in that regard, but we'll get to that.
Yeah. But fun fact about this, did you know it wasn't nominated for Best Makeup at the Oscars?
Why not?
Because that would not be a category for another 13 years.
13 years. Jesus Christ.
1981 was
makeup-
the first.
Oh my God.
The first winner of it,
insane.
Fun fact, was An American Werewolf in London.
It took that long to get such an obvious fucking award into the Oscars. Oh my God.
But John Chambers, who did the makeup for this film, won an honorary Oscar, for the achievement in makeup for this film.
Right. Okay. Right. So at those Oscars.
Yeah, so at the 1968 Oscars,
okay.
Because they do honorary Oscars every now and then, and like Alfonso Cuarón won recently for like a VR film he did,
right? And
so it's like these ones where it's like there's no specific category for this, but good on you for doing the best in that field.
You'd think after giving this guy an Oscar for best makeup for Planet of the Apes that they'd go, it's a pretty good award to give out every year. That's so interesting.
Yeah, and so John Chambers as well, and actually this will come back later, was involved in the Argo, the true caper that Argo is based on. He was the one who was hired to do all the makeup for that.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Who plays him in the movie?
No one. This was going to be for later, but in homage to his contribution, Ben Affleck's character Rick Menendez gets the idea to do the caper by watching Battle of the Planet of the Apes on TV.
Okay. All right. It feels like you could have also just put him in the movie.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he is like, this is just one fucking sentence on Wikipedia. But so a name that might come up later on, but it's worth mentioning, a guy called Arthur P. Jacobs is like the Kevin Feige of the series. That it's like, or the that guy from Nightmare on Elm Street that we didn't mention until we covered the behind the scenes documentary. But they're kind of like the main producer behind all of these films. And apparently, he did not. He wasn't consciously aware of the film's racial undertones until Sammy Davis Jr. pointed them out to him.
Interesting. And what is the discourse around the racial undertones from in Planet of the Apes?
It becomes a lot more of a thing in like later films when you're actually talking about like these ones are kept as slaves and they're uprising kind of thing. And so that's when it's like, because here it's like, oh, you've got two different races, and it's like it was happening. I put a bit too much flavor on the word races just then. You got two different races.
Hey!
It's like you've got two different races and they don't get along, and that's kind of like, whereas later on when they actually talk about like indentured servitude and things like that, and that's when it becomes a little bit harder to ignore. But I
bring it up because there is a troubling implication to this, because out of all the animals you could choose to be an allegory for racism, like apes is probably the most offensive one you could choose, right? Like, because that's an offensive what's the word? I'm trying to be very careful by saying, like, if you're making,
you're not the first person to say that.
Yeah, if you're making a film that's a metaphor for racism, and one of the characters is an animal that the affected minority are racistly compared or have been compared to in the past, like it's I want because so like most of the
it'd be like if you're making like a film about like cops and it was Planet of the Pigs.
Yeah, it'd be exactly like that. Thank you, Tyler Perry, for making that comparison at the Oscars. Like, I guess I just wonder what people who are more sensitively attuned to this kind of thing than I am, like, is this a bad thing? Is it a good thing, the way that this metaphor tracks? Because, like, I've heard some really interesting commentaries on Zootopia, because Zootopia is like very intentionally an allegory for discrimination, but also in Zootopia the discrimination is between predator and prey, which
it's completely warranted.
Yeah, same with X-Men. And so this feels a little bit more tactless, and I would, if someone's pitching a movie to me and they're like, and it's a metaphor for racism and it's about man versus ape, I'd be like, maybe make it penguins, like maybe make it an animal that doesn't have like these connotations with it, I guess.
Although, to be fair, in the first film, like the apes are the
majority, the
superior, not the superior otherwise, but like they're the dominant race, and then it's the humans that are, like, and so it's actually kind of like the white man is the ape.
Yeah, that's true. Yep, you're right.
Yeah, and then fortunately we've got Charlton Heston to play the kind of the leader of the uprising of the minority group.
So tell me, what's the deal with Charlton Heston? Because I think this is very fascinating.
Okay, so in the 50s and 60s, he was like one of very few actors to speak out against racism and was an active supporter of like civil rights movements and whatnot. In 1971, he left the Democratic Party and became a Republican and started supporting Ronald Reagan. He founded a conservative political action committee, apparently. And then he was 5-term president of the NRA, the National Rifle Association.
5
from
terms?
98 from 98 to 2003, which is only like 5 years, so a term is a year, I guess. He up until he publicly announced he had Alzheimer's, and then retired from acting and the NRA. And yeah, he had this whole catchphrase.
He's dead now, right?
He's dead. He died in 2008.
Right.
Yeah, he had this whole catchphrase of like, from my cold, dead hands. And if you've watched the documentary Bowling for Columbine, that's like a whole part of that because like in Columbine, the NRA was doing like a rally and Charlton Heston was there and it was like this whole big thing that, you know, there was the shooting and then they said, oh, maybe we shouldn't have a fucking gun rally right next door. And Charlton Heston's like, from my cold, dead hands. And then in the film, Michael Moore like goes to Charlton Heston's house and it just follows him around and is like, you know, why'd you do this kind of thing? And what should be like a big fuck yeah kind of moment where it's like you take him down. It's like, this is just a very old man who's very unaware of his surroundings. He hadn't publicly revealed at that time he had Alzheimer's, but he clearly, you know, wasn't quite all there mentally. And instead it's just like Michael Moore's just bullying an old man, following him around his house. And he essentially breaks into his house from memory. And it's, it's just a very uncomfortable scene. In what should be the big fuck yeah kind of finale, where it's like take down that
he's going for his Sacha Baron Cohen-esque takedown of him. Yeah, right. I think that's very fascinating because it reminds me a little bit of how J.K. Rowling created an entire generation of people who were tolerant of different types of people before revealing she wasn't. It's like, how do you deliver the line, you blew it up, you maniacs, you goddamn you all to hell? How do you deliver a line which encompasses like human existential dread and being aware of the danger of man, and then become the leader of the NRA or whatever? It's like it's such a blind thing to do because it's like this is a movie about what happens when you have this kind of thing. I guess he doesn't necessarily have to believe what he's acting, but it's so impassioned and full on. You would hope he you know, believes some of it. Yeah,
it's good actor though, eh?
Great actor, my God, what a performance. I just think Planet of the Apes, I loved it so much because it's almost like the stock image of sci-fi to me. Like it's such a pure,
it's got a watermark across it.
It's such a pure sci-fi. It's like what you look up when you look up sci-fi, right? Because it's like it's all about exploration, it's all about being human, it's all about the dangers of yada, you know, all the stuff we've talked about already. Like it's so. And
the NRA.
yeah. But also, it's also got that conversation about state and church and state in it, and it's like this is so sci-fi. And if you haven't seen it, by the way, the reason it's about church and state is because the scientists are also sworn to this sacred text, which says, you know, all the stuff about humans that like they are subservient to ape, and that apes are not allowed to go out into the forbidden zone, which is where he eventually discovers the Statue of Liberty. Like, it's essentially a film about scientific progress being halted for the sake of faith and religion.
Tradition.
Yeah, right? And like, that's so sci-fi. It's so good. So good.
Yeah. Well, I didn't mention it as well at the start, but this is directed by Franklin J. Schaffner. And what do you think it has at Rotten Tomatoes?
100%.
Way off.
Wow. Tell me.
87.
That's way off. You're right. This is one of those old movies that could have 100% because it's one of those old movies, you know.
Yeah, sure. Fun fact about this as well: Rod Serling of the Twilight Zone fame wrote or contributed to the script, and the twist was his idea.
It's such a Twilight Zone thing. I saw someone. There was a video from Royal Ocean Film Society, a video essay by them where they talked about remix culture, so things like the Snyder Cut, but also like the 3-hour version of The Hobbit and stuff like that. And there's a whole website and community for these ones, and one of them is the Planet of the Apes as a 20-minute Twilight Zone episode.
Oh, nice.
So there you go.
That's cool.
Because it is a Twilight Zone episode. Like everything about it.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
The twist, because this is based on a novel as well, Le Planète des Singes, which is a French book, and it's in the original book as well. This may or may not come up again later, but the film, the book ends with Taylor, the protagonist, returning to Earth and finding it's overrun with apes, and the implication being that that Earth has also gone through the same evolution kind of thing.
Right. So it's not that it's the same planet, it's that it's...
No, he leaves and returns to Earth, which is now almost identical to Le Planète des Singes.
Sounds like a very complicated ending that's got an extra step in there that the movie wisely cuts out.
Yeah.
I did not know this is based on a book. That's really interesting.
Yeah. And it's, as well, they also toyed with a bunch of different positions for the beach, for the Statue of Liberty. One was like in a jungle, with just like above her nose sticking out of the ground and things like that. But I think the beach is just such an iconic shot.
But it was always the Statue of Liberty?
Yeah.
What else could it be? If this was if the movie took place in future New Zealand, would it be like
the chalice? Yeah,
the Christchurch chalice. Oh my god. I was gonna say like the Sky Tower or whatever. That's much funnier. Imagine me. I'm the last human alive on the Planet of the Apes, and I'm walking along a beach, and I see the Christchurch chalice. Which, if you don't live in Christchurch, is this ugly fucking piece of artwork that's been in our
I remember
town
when
square.
they built it, and it was like this. Oh,
it's been there for like 20 years, maybe a little bit less, and it's like this. I don't know how tall is it? 30 feet tall chalice. It's literally
chalice crusher.
Look up the Christchurch chalice. You can see our town's local shame. I like see that on a beach somewhere in the distant future, and I'm like, you maniacs! I mean, it was never that good, but and I'm kind of glad it's damaged now. But you blew it up.
I saw that when I saw it for the first time. I was like, you maniacs! You built this fucking ugly thing.
Oh, that's so funny.
So this was followed up 2 years later. This being the film, not the chalice. Beneath the Planet of the Apes, that came out in 1970, directed by Ted Post. And what do you think it has on Rotten Tomatoes?
40.
38, very close. This is a famously bad sequel.
I'm glad
this is one of those ones. There's a couple. There's at least one more in here that's like one of those. Older people would be like, oh yeah, they talk about the same way we talk about like Suicide Squad.
Right. Because
not that that's necessarily a sequel, but one of those a go-to example of a bad film.
Right. Because overall, I knew nothing about the series. I didn't even know what they were called until I was halfway through watching them.
Yeah, I was halfway through Battle before I realized it came after Conquest.
And
which I hadn't watched.
Right, yeah. And this, so I don't really know much about them, but all I'd been told is like, first one's great, the series is fucking boring. And I was like, oh, really? And I started this one, and like, it immediately starts with the story follows another space shuttle that was following Taylor and also lands on the planet.
With a discount Charlton Heston as the pilot.
He looks exactly like... Why would you cast him?
He was cast because he looked like Charlton Heston.
That's stupid. That's the stupidest thing ever. That's what you should
Charlton
do.
Heston refused to come back. So he didn't want to come back because he doesn't like sequels, period. And he thought the story was done, kind of thing. But then he negotiated to come back. He's like, you have to kill my character and I'm going to donate my salary to charity.
He was so good. What a good guy. R.I.P.
Yeah. This was 2 years before he switched to the Republican Party.
Did he get a head injury or something? Like, what happened?
That'll be when his Alzheimer's
oh my God.
came on.
So already we're starting with, like, the definition of a derivative sequel plot, where it's just the same thing, but this retcon we didn't tell you about until now, that another ship was after him, and it basically follows
the second ship went to look for Taylor.
Yeah. And
even though there was like 3 other people on the spaceship, like, I had to find Taylor.
Yeah. It basically follows the same trajectory where he meets the same apes and escapes, and it takes sort of a turn towards the end where he goes beneath the Planet of the Apes into the New York subway system, which I guess is when he works out that it's Earth. It was Earth all along. And by the way, how iconic is the phrase "it was Earth all along"? You know, like that's where this comes from. Think about that for a second. You know, like that's the Luke.
Well,
I
it's
am
from
your
The
father.
Simpsons.
No, I know, but like when people are talking about twists, it's like he was dead the whole time, or it was Earth all along. It's this is the origin of that. And beneath the Planet of the Apes is a race of psychic humans who worship an unexploded nuclear warhead. And
as we all do.
The apes go to battle, find out about them and go to battle, and it all ends up in a big battle. Charlton Heston turns up again, and it ends with everyone getting killed, and Charlton Heston, with his final, his dying breath, launches the atomic bomb, destroying the planet of the apes.
Yeah.
And it ends with, do you have it written down? It ends,
so,
So it the whole thing, it's without any narrative device, right? You're just watching it happen. And then as it fades to white, this narrator comes in, and do you have the line? What he says?
Yeah. In one of the countless billions of galaxies in the universe lies a medium-sized star, and one of its satellites, a green and insignificant planet, is now dead.
We didn't know how to end our film. Maybe if we put this line, it's so funny. Like this is,
I kind of dug it, man. It's like, to me, it was very Twilight Zone-y.
That's true,
and I think that's what I liked about it. And it's like, I think it's a cool line as well. I think it like that just a green and insignificant planet, Earth.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like something about it, because also it's like, you're not expecting the film to just end as well. I think it's reaching a climax very much, and he smashes the bomb, or he triggers the bomb, and you're like, oh, okay, well, maybe a couple minutes left, if we're rushing it, and then boom, one line of dialogue. Hey, you wanted to do sequels? Get fucked.
You expect it's got a couple minutes left, but then you remember it's a movie from the early 1970s, and it literally has 14 seconds left until the file stops playing. I actually watched this on Disney Plus, so it's like Disney Plus has got 14 seconds. Oh no, I didn't watch this one on Disney Plus.
Because Beneath and Conquest.
I watched them on
Disney
YouTube.
Plus.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So I thought maybe I didn't like the line, because by this point I was already like, woof, what
is going on?
This is a bad sequel. And I'll tell you why I think it's a bad sequel. Because the end of the first one is as far as I want to see Taylor. He's had his character arc. It's that why you don't do a sequel to Casablanca thing. It's like, I've seen the culmination of this character arc. I don't want to know, nor do I care what happens to Taylor after this. He's learned a lesson. He's gone through change. We've experienced something with him. That's the film. I don't know. I can't help you with what this movie should be about, if not Taylor, though. But what it does is that as soon as the psychic humans are introduced, it's like, fuck, this is so missing the point. Like, as I said, the first one is this movie that juggles themes of like nuclear winter and the folly of man and religion and stuff, and this one's like, and also the humans are still here and they're psychic and they live beneath them. It's very, it feels, it's that problem that we've talked about a few times on this podcast, which is Aladdin is about learning to love yourself. The Return of Jafar is about the return of Jafar. Like, it's a film which doesn't sequel its themes. It only sequels the plot without any meaning, and it doesn't mean anything. And I just thought it completely stood on the nuts of the first film, basically.
Okay. The thing that shocked me the most about this film is that, like, how clearly a massive part of Futurama lore is based on Beneath the Planet of the Apes.
Yeah.
Like, sure, base it on Planet of the Apes. I don't care, but like, to have this like fundamental part of your show be based on this movie is so strange.
Because, of course, beneath New York and Futurama is old New York, which is essentially a... Is it a reference to Beneath the Planet of the Apes, or is it just a shared idea? You think it is? Okay.
Well, and then also the fact that mutants live down there as well.
Okay. Yeah.
Because it's the same thing. They also reference Beneath the Planet of the Apes in the first episode with mutants.
Right.
Where Fry points out that they worship an unexploded nuclear bomb.
Right. Okay, never fucking mind then, because clearly it is a direct reference that I just forgot. Yeah. No, that is mind blowing, and we'll get into this. I don't want to get into it now. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of pop culture that honors the Planet of the Apes sequels in a way I did not expect. I thought it was like the first one. The other ones are continuing the brand name, but they're forgotten.
I wouldn't have expected anyone to know what happens in the Planet of the Apes sequel, even on our Discord.
Yeah.
And because this was a Patreon suggested franchise, on our Discord, people are talking about the Planet of the Apes sequels like they'd seen them. And I was like, get fucked, you haven't. like that was actually like how I was thinking about when they were talking about it. That was like, you're just parroting some opinion. Because I was like, these are all going to be the same fucking film.
I thought so. And boy, were they not the same fucking film. The series goes in a direction that is not what I thought it was going to go in, and becomes sort of this like what the series is like ultimately about is not what I thought the series was at all.
Because I just assumed this was going to be like just shots of like apes jostling humans. Oh god, there's a moth.
Planet of the Moths. So that you continue the franchise?
That's my continue the franchise. A fucking nightmare. Where did that come from? All the windows are shut. Anyway, it's gone now.
The moths are coming from inside the house.
It's... what was I talking about? Yeah, I was expecting just shots, like the whole fucking 4 sequels to be just apes like jostling humans, shoving them into line, and the humans being like, and just that for like 7 or 8 hours.
I was expecting it's the same setup. Human from the past arrives in the future, but maybe we're in a different location each time. Like
exactly,
maybe
and especially the way that when the second film starts, you're like, okay, this is what they are.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and all the titles as well are like more or less the same thing. Like,
so
Beneath is very specific, but it still is like, it's doing a new thing. I think Beneath is the coolest title, though. You don't get a lot of films that are beneath the title of the first film. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. And we'll talk more about the titles later on, actually.
Please.
But, it's interesting. So the Planet of the Apes became this huge hit. No one saw it coming. And
much like the nuclear winter of humanity.
Very cool. So the 20th Century Fox started looking around for sequel ideas. They asked Rod Serling. His ideas didn't excite the studio. They then turned to the author of the original novel, Pierre Boulle, who wrote a draft for a sequel which was called Planet of the Men.
No. Absolutely not. This is the first idea you come up with when someone's like, quickly, come up with a sequel to Planet of the Apes. You're like, Planet of the Men? It's so obvious.
Yeah. Well, okay. I'll need to think of a new one then.
You're like, hey, Jake, you goddamn maniac. You blew it up.
You blew up my idea. So this will be about George Taylor leading an uprising to take back control. It was rejected as they felt it lacked the visual shock and surprise of the original.
Yeah, sounds like it. Yeah. And so they went with the same film, but it had psychic humans in it.
There was one more. So British writer Paul Den was hired to develop a script tentatively titled Planet of the Apes Revisited.
Oh, yeah. It's one of those sequel titles that's like, this is destined to fail because you're immediately putting a comparison in your sequel title, you know?
Yeah, but they... part of that story was a half human, half ape child, which got through makeup tests, and then the idea was eventually dropped due to the implication of bestiality. But the idea
of bestiality,
the idea that they got to the point of makeup tests And then they were looking at this like, probably like an 8 or so-year-old kid dressed up like with makeup as a monkey. And they're like, how would this be? They would have had to fuck. Like it took them that long to realize like where babies come from.
It's the 70s, man. They didn't know.
Yeah. But the idea was spawned from them thinking that, well, if the Statue of Liberty's half underground, that means New York must be under there somewhere.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Well done, guys. Yeah, I don't know. I just thought it was a pretty dumb movie and was worried that this was going to be indicative of the rest of the series. And it really goes in the next film, which probably should have just been the second one, really takes us in an interesting direction. I think because Beneath is the only one you can pluck out of the canon, and it doesn't really affect the series going forward.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, you could change it up, but yeah. What are we talking about now? Next, we've got Escape from the Planet of the Apes. This came out 1 year later. This was directed by Don Taylor, and what do you think this has on Rotten Tomatoes?
It'll be higher than Beneath. Maybe like it'll be higher than Beneath, but beneath the Planet of the Apes.
Very good.
Well, let's go 70.
77. You've done pretty well this episode.
Thank you.
And so, yeah, what's this one about?
So the main apes from the first two films, whose names are Zera and Cornelius, they're husband and wife chimpanzees. We find out that when the planet got exploded, they had found Taylor's crashed ship and got out of there as the planet was exploding, and the sci-fi oogly boogly explanation is that the nuclear blast threw their ship back in time, and they arrive on Earth at present day, being 1971. Yeah.
Fantastic setup.
Yeah, and it's the opposite of the first film. It's apes, hyper-intelligent apes in a world of humans. And then ultimately humans get very mad to find out how humans were treated in the not too distant future, and so they find out about
it is distant.
Yeah, okay, yeah, true.
It's actually fun fact about Planet of the Apes. It's now the furthest into the future we've seen on film franchise Fortnights, overtaking Jason X.
I love that. That's so cool. What about Hellraiser Bloodlines?
No, Jason X is like it's we discussed this on I gave all the dates on the Freddyverse Jason episode we did last year, but yeah, Jason X is only like 600 years into the future or something like that, and Hellraiser Bloodline is like 400, and this is a couple thousand.
Yeah. So basically they find out that the humans find out that there's going to be like this messiah ape born probably of Zera and Cornelius, who rose up against the humans. And so they find out that Zera is pregnant and decide they have to kill her ape baby, lest that ape become the prophesied one. And so Cornelius and Zera escape with the help of some humans that like them. They hide out in a circus for a bit. And then keep running with their baby. The baby's born by this point. And then ultimately they are caught. The humans catch up to them and kill all three of them. They kill Zera, Cornelius, and the baby ape until it reveals in the final seconds a twist which, despite it being pretty signposted, I was actually pretty taken, I was hit by it. I was twisted by it.
Interesting.
Which was when they were at the circus, they switched the babies. So they switched the hyper-intelligent prophecy Jesus monkey for... Sorry, I'm not supposed to say monkey, chimp, for a regular dumb chimp. And so the one with the power of speech, which is sort of the power of speech is to Planet of the Apes, which of what the power of your name is to Death Note. So it's like that's the hallmark, that's what separates man from ape, is the power of speech. And so it ends with this little baby chimp in the circus going, "Mama!" And I thought it was, what a great ending,
Yeah, Yeah, it's a great ending, but my god, the way it's done is fucking hilarious.
Yeah.
They've got a shot of an ape opening its mouth, and they just play that over and over again, and like they play it and reverse it, play it and reverse it, so it's going like opening its mouth up and down, and then they put mama, mama over top of it, and it's like, for a movie that I fucking loved, the ending was such a like funny bad ending. Just in terms of filmmaking. And it's funny you mentioned about the twist, because I assumed that it already, like the switching the babies, because there's a shot like she has the baby, then you see the other ape in the circus, the regular ape, a dumb monkey as you called it, with its ape child, and I thought I'd missed when they swapped.
Yeah,
and I was like, oh, okay, so they must have swapped. I must have just not been paying attention when they swapped.
I think the concept of it was floating in my head, but when the baby monkey the baby ape gets shot at the end, I didn't go, oh, they're fine, they've swapped babies. I was like, oh shit.
Sure. I was still like, oh fuck, they shot a baby.
yeah, exactly. But rewind, Richard, did you just say that you fucking loved this movie? Let's talk about our opinions of this movie.
Let's not.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
No, so this was followed by Conquest. No. So yeah, this movie, I again, like, coming from the place of like, oh, we've just seen Battle, and it's like what you would expect a sequel to Planet of the Apes to be, and then being like, well, what do you do after that? Like, okay, everyone survives, but they're mutated, and now the apes turn back into humans or something. But no, it's like, oh, set it in fucking modern day and have it's such a good idea. And the reveal that essentially, like, we're now getting, because there's the reboot trilogy, which we all know about, is coming next week, is that like that's a remake of the second half of the franchise.
Blew my mind.
Insane. What a fucking like interesting franchise.
That's the real twist.
It is.
Is that
it is.
The probably by and large, not necessarily more popular, but more pop culturally relevant part of the series is a remake of these films. As I said, I haven't seen properly Rise, but I've seen a scene in Rise of the Planet of the Apes that is described in this film. Cornelius describes a scene that happens in Rise of the Planet of the Apes, and I've only ever seen this happen once, Richard. Get ready, everybody, for an obscure reference, which was New Zealand, like maybe 15 years ago, there was like one of the only popular New Zealand TV dramas ever made, and it's called Outrageous Fortune. It's about a West Auckland family, and it's like a parallel Shakespearean. It's like Hamlet, is it? It's like Hamlet, but set in West Auckland.
No clue.
You never watched it?
I have. I've never seen a single like second of Outrageous Fortune, despite, like you said, it's one of our most famous pop culture exports.
Outrageous Fortune is a line from Hamlet, is it not? Slings and arrows.
The slings and arrows of Outrageous Fortune.
Yeah. So every episode's named after a Hamlet quote, right? So it's Hamlet, but with a West Auckland crime family. So already it's a cut above every other New Zealand TV show. Exactly, because it's like this cool, Shakespearean story. I don't necessarily think it's very good, and I haven't watched all of it, but there's a scene. I started watching it in 2015, which is well after it had finished, because a spin-off to it, which was a prequel series called West Side, had just come out, and I watched the first episode of that and was like, I should watch Outrageous Fortune in tandem with West Side, and this is a whole lot of explanation to say that in an episode of Outrageous Fortune, no, in the second episode of West Side, you see the main girl character, or the main played by Antonia Preble, cheating on her husband with a woman, right? And it's like the scene at the start of like the second episode of West Side, and then in like the 12th episode of Outrageous Fortune, the grandpa character, who when he was younger was the husband of this character who's cheating in West Side, talks about how her friend, whatever her name is, would come over and they'd always be alone, and it's the joke is like he didn't realize his wife was bisexual, but you see it happening in West Side, but I saw it in reverse. So I saw the thing the original was referencing before I saw the original, and same with Planet of the Apes, is that It is. I am so used to being in a time where these distant reboots or distant sequels ignore everything after the first one. You've got, Jurassic Park, Terminator. God, Terminator. Anything after Terminator 2 is Terminator 3 again. And it's so interesting that Rise of the Planet of the Apes and the whole reboot trilogy, despite more being a prequel to a movie that hasn't been made yet, as opposed to a prequel to. Or a prequel, a prequel to a remake that hasn't been made. That it's more, it's honoring the sequels that I didn't think anyone has seen more than the original in a weird way, and it gets even more intense with the further sequels.
Yeah. So in this film, we've got Roddy McDowell returns to the role of Cornelius after playing him in the first film, but not in the second film, and then due to scheduling conflicts, and then he also would then play Caesar in the next two films.
Yeah. Who, by the way, Caesar was not invented for the reboot trilogy. Mind blowing.
Ronnie McDowell, do you recognise that name? Have you seen him anywhere else?
God, I recognised the name, Richard, and every time I saw it in the credits, I was like, what's Ronnie McDowell? And I recognised that name, and I never looked it up. So
it's one of those names that I feel like I've heard it on The Simpsons, like in a joke. I'm going to search Frankiac, which is essentially searching the transcript of every episode of The Simpsons. There's Rowdy Roddy Piper. It's not in The Simpsons. But Roddy McDowell plays Peter Vincent in the original Fortnights.
Of course he does. Yes, that's very distinctive voice.
And because also just he's so good in these movies.
Oh yeah. Very powerful.
He's incredible. And the thing you mentioned about the things like the mouth will move a little bit, but only on certain words, and it's not doing like the exact mouth flap. And obviously it reacts more like the more you enunciate and the more kind of whatever you're saying. But Roddy McDowell in the first film, having already been like this established actor, was the one that would kind of talk to other people playing apes and saying like you should add things like ticks and whatnot because it makes your character feel more lived in when you're under this whole like thing of makeup. So there's all these bits. If you watch him, like his nose will like twitch and all this stuff, and it'll just like furrow his brow. And it makes the character feel so. It does make it feel so much more real.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was. He ended up being the MVP of the series for me.
The most valuable primate.
I mean, that wasn't even intentional. But yeah.
Really, I thought you were going to be like, obviously that's what I meant, AJ. But instead, it was like, no, you didn't obviously mean that. That's great.
He and then also because Roddy McDowell's career had kind of a resurgence because of his role in the original Apes. Sal Mineo took on the role of Milo, who's the third ape, which comes to Earth to the 1970s, in the hopes that it would revitalize his career. And he found the makeup very uncomfortable, and so the script was rewritten to kill his character off early, and this was his final film because he was murdered a few years later.
What the fuck? That's horrible. What a horrible series of sentences that is. Wow.
Yeah.
He gets killed by a gorilla.
What, like, the worst part is that his makeup was uncomfortable? Yeah, so like Sal Mineo from Rebel Without a Cause, he was nominated for an Oscar for that. Right. He's still like the fifth youngest Oscar nominee.
Wow. So I thought that Escape from the Planet of the Apes, I think it has a lot going for it. It did take me a little bit to get on board. I think that it's one of those things where it's like, God, you had to do time travel, didn't you? This is the only way that you could do this. But it is also like kind of stretching the reality a little bit further than I would have wanted it to be stretched. And
talking apes is one thing.
Well, I can understand being set in the future and space travel. I'm already dealing with all these other things to then go, and then also they time travel conveniently back to the perfect time for the story to take place. Is like, okay. And I thought that there's a moment in the film where they've first been accepted by humans. It's before anything goes wrong, and it's essentially a montage of like these fish out of water, these like human-esque apes in the big city, and Like they're running around and they're going to hair salons and they're drinking wine and all this thing, and it's all good. It's just you sit there and you remember 2 films ago Charlton Heston's passionate cry of "you blew it up," and it's like we are a long way from the original film. We're not in Kansas anymore. We're in a completely different film that is, I guess.
But we are also only 3 years away from that.
What do you mean? Oh, right, yeah, like literally in real time. Yeah.
Like, what's a movie that came out? A serious movie that came out 3 years ago? Oh God. You keep talking. I'm gonna.
So I guess it requires you to be on board with quite a lot of silliness before it can then get into what is actually a very beautiful and heartbreaking and sad and impactful story. It's just you've got to get behind a lot of silliness first.
Imagine if First Man had a real silly sequel.
That's a great comparison as well.
Update on the moth as well. That was in my room. So
turns out there's psychic humans living beneath my room.
Those of you who are long-time fans of the podcast might know my relationship with moths and that I do not like them. But one of the reasons I don't like them is the same reason I don't like tomatoes, is that when you like squash a moth, it just turns to dust, and like when you open up a tomato, it's like it's liquid, and it's like just be one state. You can't just have best of both worlds. Anyway, the moth landed on my computer screen, and I went to flick it away, and I crushed it, and it turned into dust, and I got moth dust all over my screen and my finger, and it was horrific. Thankfully, I had a roll of gaffer tape, offcuts of gaffer tape next to me, so I was able to wipe it off with that, and then dispose of it properly. But yeah, that was oh boy,
yeah,
not a happy camper. For me, I wasn't, not me,
not this guy, So
not us.
This film makes the first time I think in the series makes this mistake where it puts a real life chimpanzee in the same shot as the humans in chimpanzee makeup.
Yeah.
And it gets worse in the next one. But in this one, I was like that you see her hold the baby chimpanzee. And it's not just that it highlights how the Ronnie Mcdowell is clearly wearing makeup. It's not just that. It's also that it undoes what I'd said about the first film, where I could be led to believe there is a plot reason for them looking slightly fake, that, this is just what they have evolved to look like. But it's like, no, the film literally says to you, and the next one does as well, it literally says to you, there is no difference between this ape and this ape. To everyone else in this acting in this scene, these are supposed to look like the exact same creature.
Yeah.
Like, Jesus Christ, don't put real apes in the movie, because isn't the actual mother of the dumb ape at the circus, isn't that someone in a suit? The gorilla earlier on that kills Milo is a person in a suit. So it's like they were somewhat aware of it, and then we're like, well, it's a baby, it's not going to
There is definitely a real ape somewhere in there. I think the mother maybe, but I don't know. I definitely remember seeing one and having the same kind of thought process.
Well, sorry, it's the baby is a real ape.
Yeah, the baby's definitely real, but I think there is another real one somewhere in there as well. Because I just because I remember having that thought of like, that's a monkey.
It gets worse in the second one. The next one,
the fourth one.
The fourth one, yeah.
It's just, like, for all of its flaws that you mentioned, like this might be my favorite one.
I just think the first one's so good.
Well, it's one of those things where the first one's inarguably better, but I had probably enjoyed this one more.
Ah, man, I didn't at all. It was.
Oh, I fucking hated this one.
No, I liked it. I love how good this one is. Like, it's a complete left hook how good this one is. Like, it's like, whoa, did not expect this to be as good as it is. But it's no Planet of the Apes,
The film kind of came out of the idea that their budget was slashed, and they were like, well, we can't have a shitload of extras in monkey makeup. Mm-hmm. How do we have it so there's only a couple?
Yeah.
And then they were like, well, what if we set it now? And then we don't have to pay for fancy sets. Because that's also, in the original film, the reason the apes have like a more kind of primitive society. They're advanced, but they're still kind of primitive. That was to save on cost as well.
Right.
And because the makeup budget for the first film was still the highest makeup budget in history of film.
Right.
Adjusted for inflation.
There you go.
But yeah, this Paul Den was hired to write a script with a simple telegram from Arthur P. Jacobs, which stated, "Apes exist, sequel required."
Apes exist.
Yeah. Imagine getting that telegram. I wouldn't start writing a sequel.
What does that mean? Apes exist.
Further information required. Stop.
And he sends it back, but it's the same message, but now it's all in caps.
Oh my god. So that's Escape from the Planet of the Apes. Next up, we got Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. 1972. J. Lee Thompson directed this. And what do you think is on Rotten Tomatoes?
Let's go to 65.
50.
Yeah, the series doesn't reach the same heights as Escape again.
Yeah.
But it's still not too bad. So this one is about this one is essentially Rise of the Planet of the Apes in the series.
Yeah, Rise of the Planet of the Apes is ostensibly a remake of this.
You're right. How much wine? How much of the Planet of the Grapes? How thick into the Planet of the Grapes are you, mate?
I'm actually not that thick. This is maybe I've had 1.5 glasses.
Okay. All
but
right.
Yeah.
So this is about
glasses.
it's now set in the distant future of 1990. The circus owner that was left with the intelligent ape now
played by Ricardo Montalban as well, which is worth mentioning because he's a famous. He's Khan from Wrath of Khan.
Oh, okay. But now he's all grown up, and his name is Caesar. So that, yeah, as I said before, blew my mind to find out that Caesar was not a character invented for.
Which is also interesting because the scene you mentioned where it's like they're describing a scene, they talk about like, oh, this ape that stood up to humans, his name was Aldo. And then in the, like, when they talk about that scene again in the later two films, they just conveniently forget to mention that Cornelius said his name was Aldo.
Did he call him Aldo? That's so interesting.
Yeah, they said, it was when an ape named Aldo stood up. And then we're introduced to an Aldo later on, but it's not that ape because it's after the event that's talked about has happened.
And he's a villain as well.
And so this is like, just gloss over it.
Wow,
like,
that's so fascinating.
They just prefer the name Caesar, I guess.
Yeah, well, it is. I think
because it's like there's no reason you couldn't just call Caesar Aldo and be like, oh wow, like it's a bootstrap paradox.
Yeah. So yeah, they're all grown up, and by this point, so something we haven't mentioned yet is which is what we found out in Escape, is that the reason that apes were able to rise up and take over is because there was a virus in the 80s, in the distant future of the 80s, which wipes out cats and dogs, and humans, in a desperate attempt to find something else to have as a pet, start using apes as pets and start using them as slaves until they rise up and take over. So we are now like right in the thick of humans using apes as slaves. This was a little bit, this really pushed my disbelief, because it's like, it's a bunch of people dressed up as apes being enslaved by real people, and it's like, I had to Google how tall are apes watching this movie, because I was like, chimps aren't like the same height as humans. That like they don't. I feel like they don't do as good of a job moving like chimpanzees in this. You know, like they all kind of just look like dudes in suits. But anyway, Caesar's the only one that can talk, but he has to keep it a secret until he doesn't, and starts an uprising. And ends with them burning down the sort of main little building that most of the film is set at, and declaring that apes will now take over, essentially, with fire in his eyes.
And this really, like, it ends up with the big fucking battle between the humans and apes, and it was originally a lot more gruesome. Dr. Barrel on the Discord referenced like a better ending, which is real hard to find. So I don't know. I didn't even try and find it.
What happens in it?
But it was the brutal killing of Governor Breck with an implicit message that the circle of hatred would never end. It was...
That's interesting, because I feel like that isn't the message of the film. Like, I
You
feel
feel
like
like it isn't?
the message of the film is the circle of hatred can end.
Yeah, right, yeah.
You know?
Mm.
Which is, to be honest, not for humans to say. Like, the humans writing the script is probably not... They're probably not in the position to say, yes, the cycle will end.
Yeah. And so it was... they didn't have... They couldn't reshoot anything, but they had to change the ending. So what they did was they recorded like a different version of Caesar's final speech. They got Ronnie Mcdowell to do it. And through clever editing techniques, i.e. like wide shots where you can't really see the mouth flap, or like just showing his eyes, he like was saying different dialogue than he was saying on set. And then also the guerrillas hitting Breck with the rifles, they played that backwards, so it looks like they're being like, oh, all right, we won't hit him kind of thing. And so they made it that it's, becomes this non-violent thing rather than like this brutal murder.
I like calling that clever editing techniques and not editing. Like, that's what editing is. You have described film editing.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I think,
it is an editing technique. It's just, it's not, I don't know. You said it with a tone, so I was building off your incredulousness of saying you were like clever editing techniques.
That's just my voice.
Well, this is just mine. I just sound
Don't
like
it.
I'm
Not a
making
fan.
fun of things when I'm talking.
I just sound like... Yes, that's actually... Yeah, what did you think of this film?
I thought it was all right. I think it feels like it's the least that happens in all of them. It feels like, as I said, I found it's the one where the cracks feel like they're showing the most in terms of the makeup. And you see
because they still had a lower budget, but they now had to have a lot more people in Ape.
Yeah.
Makeup.
And this is one where like Caesar gets put in the same room as an adult like real life chimpanzee and stuff like that. And it's just, it's like, Jesus Christ, why would you put these on screen together? Why would you do this to your audience? It's like in Looper when you see the midway point between Bruce Willis and Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and it's Bruce Willis dressed up as Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and it fucking ruins the film. Like, it's that sort of thing to me, and it just really like rubbed me the wrong way. I thought the ending was awesome. I thought the speech he gives was really cool, and just that shot of Caesar standing there in like a city on fire was very like, this is very revolutionary. Like this feels very from the heart, and it almost feels like the production value can't keep up with the quality level of storytelling almost. And the sequels.
Yeah, there was another thing that was cut as well, is that the script, this is the only one film without a pre-title sequence because it was cut out, and it was a fugitive ape being shot by police, and then they would like find the body had been covered in cuts and bruises and scars and whatnot, and then realizing like like this is the kind of living conditions. But I guess they found it unrealistic that the cops would shoot an unarmed person who was living in a kind of lower socioeconomic situation.
Wow. Very relevant. Nice work. What do you think of this one?
Yeah, I liked it. And it is cool that it's like a pre-make of Rise of the Planet of the Apes.
Yeah, pre-make. It's a new term for just a film that happens to get remade later on.
Yeah, I like. It's insane that it's. I'm never going to get over that.
Just finding out how much was already built before the reboot trilogy. Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. It's very, very good stuff for our the hallowed halls of our franchise observations.
Hello, halls.
That's
what I say when I walk into the halls.
You're too drunk.
This also has the highest body count of the franchise.
Oh, I'm not surprised. There's a whole fucking
What would you guess the
There's a
body
bloody
count is?
conquest in it.
Since you've been so good at guessing,
I don't know, 500.
oh no, you're way off.
What is it?
You should have caught by your head. 59.
I was way off.
Yeah. Couldn't have been more off.
I would argue that at the end of Beneath the Planet of the Apes, when you see the world explode, that's a higher body count.
That's true. That is true. Have you got any more you want to say about Conquest?
Not really. It's the one which plods the most. It's the one where it's like, I'm watching this, but there's nothing to talk about.
Yeah, which is interesting, because then it's kind of like it's remade into a real fucking good movie. Spoilers for next week.
Oh.
So, Battle for the Planet of the Apes, 1973.
Oh,
again,
wait.
directed by J. Lee
One
Thompson.
thing.
Yeah.
We talked about how, like, in Escape, how he says the ape's name is Aldo. You don't. Is there a point where Caesar even does the thing that is described by Cornelius?
Not really, no.
Because he says that he stood up and said no to a human, which is something that is seen in Rise and is there's a very big thing in Battle about the word no, and so it felt like it's just a straight up missing scene. All right, like it feels like it must have happened and I just wasn't paying attention. But
that's the thing, that like by naming the character in Battle Aldo and that not happening, because Battle takes place after the ape uprising, so it's post the scene that Cornelius described, where, as you said, Aldo stands up and says a word that he's heard hundreds of times and says no to a human. Yeah, but then that doesn't really suit Caesar's character. Well, I guess kind of by the end of Conquest it does. But it's one of those things that there's no time where it really could have happened. And then also that's also interesting, inviting another thing, that Cornelius in the original Planet of the Apes and the whole ape civilization has no recollection that there was a human race before that, like, humans were the dominant species at any point. And then in the third one, Cornelius talks about how the day that the humans fell essentially is celebrated as a holiday. And so that was like
it's all bloody retconning, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's just one of those things. It's just a blatant, we had this better idea, so we ignored the first one kind of thing.
I love it and hate it at the same time.
Yeah. So, Battle for the Planet of the Apes. J. Lee Thompson again directed this. What is this one about?
So this one is essentially Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, or a pre-make of Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. It's humans and ape living in somewhat harmony, but things don't go completely according to plan when Caesar finds out that tapes of his parents exist back in the city that has now been like nuked, basically. And so they go back to try and find these tapes, but in doing so alert a like bottom-dwelling human pack of their existence, and so a war breaks out between this sort of like attempt at peace between humans and apes that Caesar has made.
Would you call it a war, or is it more of a
small fight?
Battle.
But along the way, there is also a gorilla named Aldo, who is the sort of general of the soldiers, because all gorillas are soldiers, and he does not like that we're still treating humans right. And I think it's something like in the tapes they find of Cornelius, he says that the gorillas are the ones that started the war or something like that, and so there's this. Yeah. There's this ordained to be Judas kind of. Because
even in amongst the apes, they have their own class structure of gorillas, orangutans, and chimpanzees.
Yeah. And so it ends up being a big battle between the apes and the humans, and then also the gorillas, and it ends up... Caesar's son is killed. His little boy is killed by... Aldo, the gorilla, and which breaks the sacred rule of ape shall not kill ape, and so Caesar then does he duel Aldo, or is that like a dream sequence? He like kicks him out of a tree. Does that actually happen, or is it like?
No, that happens.
Okay, it sort of looked like they were showing like this could happen, but yeah, I guess it sort of ends in this midpoint, and then it cuts to the future because it's been bookended by this old ape telling the story, and the old ape is talking to a collection of chimps and humans, implying that it's a very happy ending for a otherwise very pessimistic series, because it implies that we found a way to get along with each other.
Yeah, the cycle of hatred was broken.
Yeah.
But then it goes over to a close up of a statue of Caesar with a single tear falling from one eye is shown, and apparently your critics have offered various interpretations of this. Is this this him crying tears of joy because the species have broken the cycle of oppression, and thus making an optimistic ending to the franchise because this is the last film in the original run, or is he weeping because racial strife still exists, implying the dystopian future of Planet and Beneath is unavoidable?
Right, yeah, because you do see an ape child bully a little girl. It's very subtle, but at just before you see that. But it felt like sort of a thing showing them coexisting as opposed to showing that there's still all this stuff going on,
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. What does this one have on Rotten Tomatoes?
36.
Oh yeah, you don't sound sure of yourself.
No, I was doing a guess, and then it is 36.
Right,
wow,
it is 36.
I was exactly right.
Yeah. So is this the lowest one then?
Is it lower than the second one? Yeah, by 2%.
I would say the second one's much worse than this one.
Yeah, this one's. I want to talk about what was your review for this film that you wrote on Letterboxd?
I wrote, it's 45 minutes of story put into 90 minutes of movie.
Which is interesting because this was remade into 2 movies.
Yeah, sure. But I mean, remade in the sense that it's like the very basic premise and then everything else
ideas.
Yeah.
And they're not officially, like, no one's ever said that, and they would say it's not if you ask them. But if you ask Matt Reeves, he would probably deny it.
Deconstructing your own indictment of my review.
No, but I just find it fascinating that you're like, oh, there's only 45 minutes worth of story here. They took that 45 minutes and fleshed it out and made 2 fucking movies out of it.
What I'm more saying is, like, there's so many scenes that are just dialogue-less battles that aren't particularly interesting, and so I thought that was like like I zoned out watching this movie because there are just moments that go for ages that are just apes battling humans, not hitting. We'll get to that later.
Yeah, I like this stuff, but it is the kind of thing that's done better in Dawn, well, of the whole like ape shall not kill ape, and like a Judas amongst the ranks. Yeah, but I liked seeing the early ideas of civilization, where humans are enslaved, but they've got like the apes have a human teacher, and. I don't know. It's like that was maybe I would have liked to see more of that in the world.
I thought that the most fascinating thing this movie did was with that human teacher, where Aldo at the start, when he's being he doesn't really want to listen to what this human
being naughty
teacher has to say. He goes to rip up some important documents that the teacher's got, and he goes, "No, Aldo, no!" And then everyone's stunned and looks around, and one of the orangutan elders comes over and tells the teacher information which, to be honest, he probably should have been made aware of much earlier than this, where he basically says, like, because of the connotations of a human telling an ape no, it is now basically a slur, and you can't say no.
Yeah, you can't say the N-word.
So exactly. So he says he literally says an ape may still say no to a human, but a human may never still say no to an ape.
It's their word.
It's their word, right? And I was like,
and because they talk about it being Caesar's least favorite word.
Yeah,
and that the connotation. He and although you said that he should be made aware of it, he is aware of it because it's what our older goes to rip up is Cornelius, who's Caesar's son, being named after his dad. It's his it's his work, and it says because they're doing this whole class about ape shall never kill ape, and then Cornelius writes ape shall never kill Abe. Abe being the teacher's name,
Yeah.
and he's like, oh, this is this really nice thing that like this ape said, I'm one of the good ones, kind of thing. And when Abe says no to Aldo, he's saying like, no, don't rip that up, because he was worried about Aldo facing the wrath of Caesar by ripping up his child's work.
Yeah. What I was more saying, like, it's the orangutan explaining it is very like talking to the audience, giving the audience information.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
But I thought that was a really fascinating wrinkle, because this is a movie that came out in the mid-70s, and it does the explanation on why historical context means some people groups can say or do some things while others can't. In a movie from the mid-70s, Richard, that's something people don't get now. You know, like my dad doesn't know why he's not allowed to do an Asian accent anymore, or was never allowed to do one. But like, if I tell my dad to not do a racist accent, it's gonna be met with like vitriol. It's gonna be met with like, oh, you
a racist accent.
Yeah.
No, I'd be like, just listen to it. Just listen to it. You'll get it.
You can't bloody say anything these days. That sort of thing. And this is a movie from this far, like from this long ago, which articulates it in such an and it's the exact same situation. The reason why white people shouldn't say the N-word is because it's a word that has historical context and power of oppression, and it's the same thing. And it's so interesting that this teaching and these this explanation existed back then. This isn't discourse that has cropped up recently. This is clearly discourse that has been around since long before, you know.
Well, and so because I was actually thinking about this, the another thing of like, you go on like the Reddit comments or whatever from anything about like they're casting new voice actors for The Simpsons so that, you know, white people aren't playing people of color anymore, and they're like, oh, well, they're going to get a real Scottish person to voice Groundskeeper Willie, or like, oh, actors should be able to play anyone, and it's like, in an ideal world, it wouldn't be a problem. But that's the thing. Like, when The Simpsons were making their voice cast 32 years ago, they said, well, we've got all these characters of color. Should we hire one person of color? No, let's not do that. Hank Azaria can do the voice. And it's like, so 32 years ago, someone lost out on the role of a lifetime. And these people exist. It's not like, you know.
Oh, they absolutely exist, Yeah,
and it's, and so... like if racism had never been an issue, people would be able to play anyone they wanted, because there would have never been a point when black people or women as well would be missing out on roles, or transgendered individuals would be missing out on roles because a white man can play that kind of thing.
And this is what I talked about this a lot in my Borat video that I released a couple weeks ago. And it's so cool to see it in such an old movie, you know. And it's so true. Like, I've gone off Reddit for that reason. That it's like people on there being like, well, this means this, and it's like, no, it fucking doesn't. There exists.
Yeah, I mean, they love to shit on Ben Shapiro, but it's like, they're the kings of fucking false equivalency.
That's the word I'm looking for. Yeah, it's false equivalency. Yeah. Like, it's so hard going to like.
And it's like, and you know, if like a like when a black comedian does whiteface, they're like, oh, well, why isn't this an issue? It's like, because no white man has ever lost a job because they say, oh, well, Dave Chappelle can do it and wake up.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
So it's real good. It was probably the highlight of the movie, and it was this very incidental moment that has quickly moved on from. But in the same way that names are important in Death Note, it's like speech, and especially
keep going on about Death Note, mate.
No. I've not stopped thinking about Death Note since we covered it, dude. Haven't watched the anime though. So I don't know.
If you're in our Discord as well, if you need a reason to join the Discord and you want to learn more about Death Note, Josh Monson left a very good analysis of why the second half of the series isn't as good. And I was like, because this was someone who was like, well, I want to listen to the episode, but I don't want to be spoiled, so I'll watch the entire anime. And he did. And then it's like, it's one of these things of like someone just observing it and then leaving this like completely perfectly eloquent explanation of like, yeah, this is everyone's problem with it, dude. Like,
yeah. That's awesome.
But not in a way of like, yeah, way to finally catch up. It was like, yep, you've exactly surmised like the general consensus.
Right, that's cool. Nice.
Ape shall never kill ape, eh?
That's what they say.
That was a cool scene as well. That's a cool scene as well. That when that's the one law of it, because I guess to them it's like, well, if we kill each other, we're no better than humans.
Well, that's just the philosophical question that the latter half of the series grapples with, is like the first movie's allowed to just be like, look, they blew it up, those maniacs, but then the rest of the series has to be like, okay, but what happens next? Is reaching sentience and intelligence part and parcel with being susceptible to evil? You know.
Yeah.
Here's the thing about Planet of the Apes. All the movies we've talked about and all the ones we're going to talk about. And here's what it grapples with, right? It grapples with saying these profound things and a lot of them being very well told and very beautiful stories. But then also, it's also a series which has people dressed up as monkeys running around acting like monkeys. And it's one of those things where it's like, this is very silly. The ape, unfortunately, is nature's clown. Like, this is the funniest animal. Like, I would take maybe another animal doing this more seriously than I would an ape. And so it grapples with, like, these very serious doom themes under a surface level of, like, something that could look very funny. I remember feeling that watching Dawn in the cinemas. Was like, this is real good, but, like, they're monkeys. Like,
they're monkeys. They're not monkeys.
They're chimps. Apes. Fuck.
Fuck. Yeah, it's funny. I haven't seen War. I've seen the other two of the reboot trilogy, and it's. We'll probably talk about this more next week. But it's funny this thing of like, oh, they're fucking amazing, but I haven't got around to seeing War, and I watched the other two well after they came out in cinemas. Like, I don't know anyone that, like, I know, like, everyone I know loves at least one of them, or like, you know, can appreciate that they're incredible films. But no one like saw them in the cinema.
I saw the second one in the cinema. That's the only time I've seen it.
Yeah, but even still, it's like you have this weird experience. Like, yeah, they're good, but like my experience watching them was like unconventional.
Yeah,
but yeah, I know that Dawn deals with the like ape shall not kill ape and the Judas kind of thing, and so I'm interested to see what from Battle that War brings in. I know Woody Harrelson's in it.
Yeah,
I don't know that much else about it.
No, neither. Yeah.
But that is Battle for the Planet of the Apes, and then the series lay dormant for quite a fucking long time as well, like just under 30 years.
Wow! And
then it was rebooted with Planet of the Apes, 2001, directed by Tim Burton. And what's this one about?
It's essentially the same plot as the first one. It's just a bit glossier. It has more recognizable actors. And it's really fucking bad. It's the worst movie I've seen in a while, and arguably I've watched the Barbie movies pretty recently. And I watched Death Note 2016 relatively recently. 2017.
What do you think it has on Rotten Tomatoes then?
40. It's not as low as it
40,
should be.
44.
Yeah.
It's not that low.
It should be. This movie sucks. So the only thing it really has going for it is the production value is awesome, and it has some good actors in it. The highlight of which I think was probably Paul Giamatti plays an orangutan, and does a pretty good job of it. Mark Wahlberg.
Can you do an impression of Paul Giamatti?
I don't think so. What is the Paul Giamatti traits with which you would?
I'm fucking Paul Giamatti.
Yeah, right. Yeah, totally. So
yeah, that was perfect.
It's what I don't know. When you're describing this film, it takes out the existentialism out of it. You know, the worst part of the original jokes. It's the best part, and is way more of a race allegory.
A very funny joke, AJ. Congratulations.
And it takes out the Statue of Liberty scene at the end, and instead Mark Ruffalo goes back to Earth only to find that
that he's changed from Mark Wahlberg into Mark Ruffalo.
Fuck. You never just correct me. You always have to work it into like what I've said is true, and so you go like you don't go, oh, it wasn't Mark Ruffalo, it was Mark Wahlberg. You go, oh, and he discovers this, AJ. You fucking idiot. You damn dirty. Mark Wahlberg.
When else have I done? Can you think of any other examples?
Please don't make me back that up.
I just did it then.
He goes back to Earth.
That's an example of it.
He goes back to
Yeah,
Earth.
AJ, name one other fucking time. You damn dirty ape.
You maniac. You blew it up. My point, my sentence, my summary. He goes back to Earth and finds that the Lincoln Memorial is now an ape Lincoln, and there's apes still around.
Well, it's not just ape Lincoln; it's General Thade, Tim Roth's character. It does a close up of like.
Does it?
It's yeah.
Is that
yeah.
Thade?
So
I had no idea that was Thade.
This is the thing that's like it takes it, I guess, from being the original ending of the book that like he returns to Earth, finding out it's also gone through a Planet of the Apes kind of thing, to like. Well, how does that make sense? Because, yeah, the Lincoln Memorial is now a memorial to Thade, which is the villain of the film, played by Tim Roth, who's an ape. And so, because we watched this as like a group watch with our Discord.
Yeah.
And I said, hot take, this ending isn't that bad. And the hot take, I don't think it's that bad. Like, I think that the returning to, like, that if you're going to do a remake of Planet of the Apes, a film most famous for its ending, the way to do that would be to then do the original ending from the book and do the he returns to Earth and finds out, or because like on one hand it's like it's so iconic you have to do it again. But then on the other hand it's like it's so iconic that maybe you just shouldn't touch it. You know?
Well, I'd say I understand the desire to do to see an iconic thing. You know, an iconic landmark that's been degraded in the same way, that's been aped in whatever way that means. And, like, so I understand that. I think it's just an implicitly silly thing, again, to see as an Abraham Lincoln monkey. But yeah, is it that does he get home and Earth it's a different Earth, or is it that he never left, or is it that I thought for a moment, the twist was actually that when he goes back in time, when he lands on the planet, he's actually landing in the past then. And that he goes back to the future to find that his actions obstructed, Butterfly affected the whole world. And now, like, do the events of Planet of the Apes happen before the end? But before anything, like, is the events of Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes set in the past, and without Mark Wahlberg turning up there, it would have eventually ended up with two guys sitting down talking about a podcast. But because Mark Wahlberg went to interrupted the time-space continuum, it meant that now there aren't two guys doing a podcast; it's two apes doing a podcast. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah, kind of. Because it is like, it's one of those things where it's like when people talk about this film being bad, it's one of the things they point to. And I don't know, like, I wonder if this had been the original ending of the 1968 film, I wonder if it would have, it probably wouldn't have had like the legacy it's had, but I wonder if it would have the same kind of I guess what I'm saying is I wonder if people's hatred of the ending is actually entirely it being confusing, or just because it's not the original.
Well, it's not just that it's not the original, it's that the whole film is like a bastardization of this classic, and then it has the gall to do a different ending, It's like...
Sure.
My problems with this movie happened long before the Abraham Lincoln. The worst thing in this film for me is that when Mark Wahlberg gets lumped in with all the other feral humans, they can all talk. And they all speak with American accents, which again is like, and none of these movies is this explained, how not only does everyone talk in English, but it's like not a developed form of English at all. Like in the original one, it's like maybe they didn't think about it, but like linguistically, at the very least, the ape language would be like a bastard form of American English, you know.
Yeah.
But in this, all the
it
humans...
is, although one character we don't see talk, which is very funny that this is the first time she's been mentioned, but Linda Harrison has a cameo in this film. Linda Harrison, who played Nova in the first two films, who's like the love interest, but is very much like an attractive woman who doesn't talk and is kind of
hangs
just
off
there.
Charlton Heston's arm. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. But yeah, she has a cameo in this film as a woman in a cart at the start who does not talk. A reference to the fact that her character is mute in the first two films, apart from saying Taylor's name.
So not only can the humans talk in this version, but it's still a secret that they can talk. Meaning, in all of ape history, no human has ever said anything to an ape, which is a strategy. They've chosen not to.
It's like Toy Story.
Yeah, they've chosen not to do that, which also implies intelligence. And we've talked about how these movies impress upon you the importance of the ability to speak, the ability of speech, right? And the reason for that is because that's how intelligence is expressed, right? Yeah. So if the humans can talk, that means the humans were always intelligent, which means they didn't need fucking Marky Mark to help them start a fucking uprising. They could have done it the whole time because they could always talk. It is a decision, a change in the remake which fundamentally breaks the whole point. I thought if they can both talk, then it's game over, or at least the war is already going.
Game over, man.
Yeah, I just thought that was so stupid and absolutely ruined well, I didn't ruin it. It was already bad. I've got a few other problems with it. It starts off bad. It starts off and it's like, this doesn't feel right.
Well, also the one of the weirdest thing about it is that like, so this isn't like Tim Burton finding himself kind of thing. This is like well into Tim Burton's. We'd already seen Beetlejuice, Batman, Edward Scissorhands, Ed Wood,
like Burton-esque films.
Yeah, like it already had very clearly. This is the least Burton-esque film out of his filmography. His next film though would be Big Fish, which is far and away his best film.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an interesting thing, and apparently, and this is kind of what a few people have said, that it's one of these things where this was obviously a big landmark release, that it's like, we're doing a remake of Planet of the Apes. Fox said has to come out on this day, and you know, they hadn't even hired Tim Burton, but they had a release date set in stone. And so, speaking of set in stone, Oliver Stone was actually one of the directors attached to one point. So was Chris Columbus, Sam Hamm, James Cameron, Peter Jackson, all these names that kind of were in various stages of agreeing to do it. But
Peter Jackson's pretty good. You know,
yeah,
even
obviously,
pre-Lord of the Rings. Obviously, it's crucial to human history that Peter Jackson did not direct this film in the year 2000. Yeah. But there you go.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. He actually he turned it down because he was like, Lord of the Rings was on the verge of being cancelled, and Ronnie McDowell died in October of 1998, and he was like, like, I've got too much going on, and I wouldn't want to potentially bastardize Ronnie McDowell's legacy just after he's died.
Interesting. Speaking of bastardizing legacies, let's continue talking about this bastardization of a legacy. One of the things that we had a small disagreement on was that I was ragging on the art direction, and you were like, I think it's amazing. It's the execution that's the problem, not the effect. And I do agree.
Well, that's why I said that, like, because you were like, these apes look like fucking shit. Yeah. And I was like, the apes look amazing, but they're designed poorly. Especially the female apes. It's like they're trying to make them too believably sexy, but it's like the makeup effects are incredible.
So, but it's this thing where like Paul Giamatti plays an orangutan and looks great. He looks like an orangutan that can speak. Whereas Helena Bonham Carter plays a female ape that's this like slender, sexualized kind of like they've tried to make the female ape characters feminine, but they haven't made the male ape characters masculine. They just look like regular apes.
Well, it's that kind of thing that the female ape makeup almost has that, like, you know, like in old school Hollywood movies, they'd put like the Vaseline on the lens to defocus the woman a little bit. It looks like that, but it's like baked into the makeup. It's very strange.
It's very strange. And there was a drinking rule that we had for this game, which was drink every time there is interspecies flirting, which happens a lot between Mark Wahlberg and
off camera as well, like in our group chat as well while we're watching
it. What other species was in our group chat?
An ape.
It was MVP. It was Jack.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk about this because there's a moment in the original film right at the end where Taylor, Charlton Heston's character, he shakes the hand of Cornelius, and then he goes up to Zara and he says, Zara, what's his name? Zara? Zara. He goes up to Zara and he says, Zara, I'd like to give you a kiss. And they kiss, and it's not romantic. It's like a statement on, like, you know, it's the shaking hands of the oppressor with the oppressed to prove that there's, you know, that all malevolence has gone and that they see them each other as equals. And Zara actually does this to a human at the end of Escape. And both of these times, it's like, this is so sweet. It's not sexual at all. It's like it's a symbol, you know? And then
it's like the Kick-Ass Hit Girl kiss at the end of Kick-Ass 2.
Yeah, totally. And then in this, they kiss at the end, and it's Mark Wahlberg being the most, like, beefcake.
Fucking Frenching on Ari.
No, not exactly. It's just totally, it totally doesn't read the same, especially because they've been flirting all the way through, which is made even more funny by the fact that there's, like, a supermodel human character who's also there. And so it's like Mark Wahlberg's character consciously chooses to pursue a romantic endeavor with the ape character and not with the character who's of his own species, who's also incredibly attractive, and
is into him as well.
Yeah, it's so strange. It's such a. What did you think of this movie?
I thought it was great.
You did not. It's fucking boring as well. It's not even at the very least it could be so bad it's good, but it's not even that. It's just a chore to get through.
Yeah, that's the thing. I would love a terrible Planet of the Apes movie directed by Tim Burton. Like, that's the thing. Like, yeah, there's a lot, like, Mark Wahlberg starring in, like, a gritty reboot of Planet of the Apes, directed by Captain Wacky himself, Tim Burton. And you've got Paul Giamatti as, like, a comic relief character. And then you go, and it was universally panned. Yeah. It's like, yeah, fuck, dude, sign me up. That's why we did a group watch for it on the Discord. Yeah. And then you watch it and everyone's just like, oh yeah, I forgot this movie's actually just bad.
It's boring. It's so
like
boring.
It's not like, you can't even make fun of it. It's just like, whatever. Funny thing about, like, the casting in this film though, so Mark Wahlberg had to turn down, he had to back out, not just turn down, but back out of Ocean's 11. He was cast as Linus in Matt Damon's role.
Right.
That was originally Mark Wahlberg, and he had to pull out to do Planet of the Apes. And also Tim Roth had to turn down Snape in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone to play General Thade.
That's so interesting that, like, Alan Rickman wasn't clearly always the perfect choice for Snape. Huh. Michael Clark Duncan plays a guerrilla soldier in this, and he's pretty. And
great. That's one that Djimon Hounsou actually managed to get out of because and he was originally cast in that role, but he had to turn it down because of the 4 feathers.
Wow, there you go. What else is there to say about this movie? It's just it's so boring. It's just so boring, and by the time anything's happening in it, I've lost interest. It has a bunch of what feel like very expendable human characters along for the journey who don't die. Like, there's the guy, there's a bald guy in it who is the actor from The Mummy that tells off Rachel Weisz when she knocks over the the bookshelves, who was also in the Stargate movie, which I watched today, so that's why I'm thinking about him. And that's like a character actor who's like built to be a red shirt for these kinds of like 2000s adventure
Eric
movies.
Avari.
Yeah. Like that's the kind of character you add to your cast because you're like, well, we've got to raise the stakes somehow by killing off some not important characters. They all survive.
See what Eric's up to.
They all fucking live. They all fucking live to the end. It's such a waste.
Yeah, he's it's also got Chris Christopherson in it from Blade.
And Lone
the
Dinosaur.
Lone Dinosaur himself from Blade. One more fun thing about the casting. But it says, whereas other actors contending for the Leo Davidson role, Leo Davidson being the replacement for Taylor in the original film.
Mark Wahlberg's character.
Yeah, he said, whereas other actors contending for the Leo Davidson role wanted to see the script before signing a contract, Wahlberg signed on after a 5-minute meeting with Burton, which, like, if this film was incredible, it would be like, wow, that's cool. And this one, it's like...
It's not even like Tim Burton's a bad director either. Like if this was
he made Big Fish.
If this was like a Roland Emmerich film or a Uwe Boll film, it's like, oh, Mark Wahlberg. That's, you want to be able to make fun of everyone involved, but it's just stacked with talented artists, and it's like it's so, oh my god, it's such a depressing remake. I remember this might be my first memory of a remake being like regarded as terrible, like when this came out. I remember being very young and everyone being like, this is bad.
The Tim Burton has said that he would rather jump out of a window than direct a sequel to this. And in 2011, while being interviewed by MTV, Mark Wahlberg was asked about Rise of the Planet of the Apes, and he said, I haven't seen it yet, but I heard it was pretty damn good. Well, ours wasn't. It is what it is. Ours wasn't. They didn't have the right script. Fox Studios had a release date before Tim Burton shot a foot of film. They were pushing him and pushing him and pushing him in the wrong direction. You have to let Tim do his thing.
Do you know what? First of all, excellent Mark Wahlberg impression.
Oh,
Secondly, like, he's right. Like, Mark Wahlberg, I was about to say Mark Wahlberg gets it. He decidedly does not get it. But in that case, he understood, like, he's right. Like, he just articulated the problem with the movie. And it's not the first time I've heard Mark Wahlberg discuss what's wrong with a movie he's been in as well, because he did the same thing about The Happening. So at least he's like an actor that seems to be able to be like, look, I was in a bad movie. Whatever. I'm also in The Departed.
But then he's also was like, I had to apologize to God for being in Boogie Nights. And it's like, that's your best film. Like, your best role. You're incredible in that film. Yeah. The film is amazing. But yeah, like the thing is that, like, what he said about you have to let Tim do his thing. It's like Tim Burton and a remake of Planet of the Apes are not a bad combination.
No, but at the same time, it's like, when people be like, this is what a Tim Burton version of this movie would look like, and it's like all twisty spiralies and stuff. Like, it's not that either, and I don't want to see the Nightmare Before Christmas version of Planet of the Apes, But,
although he didn't direct that.
I know, but that's the style.
It's also his, like, he was heavily involved in the production. But it's like, I don't know, I mean, do it dark, twisted, spirally, I don't care.
Okay. It's not
I
my
don't fucking
first
give a
choice
shit, man.
All right.
Well, just say, like, it's one of those things that, like, if someone said, I mean, like, okay, nowadays, but coming, like, what did I say? He was like, he'd just come off like Edward, Mars Attacks, Sleepy Hollow, and if that era of Tim Burton, someone said he's going to make a remake of Planet of the Apes, that's not inherently a bad idea. If someone like someone has to make a remake of Planet of the Apes, like, let's say, and then Hollywood goes, we're going to get Tim Burton to do it. Back then you'd be like, that's kind of cool. I mean, you think about like what he did with Batman.
Yeah.
Like the dark and gritty remake before dark and gritty remakes were a thing.
20 years before they were a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a good point.
So I guess that kind of brings us to continue the franchise. Tim Burton's remake was, while financially successful, actually. Let's see if I can tell you how much it made. Yes, it made $362 million on a $100 million budget.
Well,
so
yeah, I mean,
it was actually very successful.
Yeah, this is what the type of thing that people see. It just doesn't. It's just not. It's like Venom, you know. Although Venom got a sequel,
which made Venom made $1 billion, didn't it?
probably.
Yeah. So, continue the franchise. This is one of those franchises where it's like there's comics, there's novelizations, there's novels, there's video games, kind of thing. But obviously, most prominently, there is the reboot series, which is Rise of the Planet of the Apes, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, and War for the Planet of the Apes, which came out in 2011, 14, and 17. And we will be covering that very neat trilogy next week, not next fortnight. We're doing something different, film franchise Fortnights, but in 1 week we're doing
it's a double episode of film franchise Fortnights, so it still exists as part of this fortnight, I guess.
Yeah.
So has there never been like an Apes TV show or anything like that?
There is a TV show as well, yes.
Okay.
So there's the Planet of the Apes series, which was in 1974, so like just after Battle. And then there's Return to Planet of the Apes, which was a Saturday morning cartoon. And then there's Behind the Planet of the Apes, which I think is a one-off documentary special. But yeah, there's
Is that a joke? Were you doing a joke? Because that's very funny. Like, I was completely in the headspace of, like, thinking of titles for Planet of the Apes movies, and then you go, Behind the Planet of the Apes. I'm like, oh, what's that one about? It's like, it's a behind-the-scenes documentary.
No, that's real.
Yeah,
there is really a behind-the-scenes about Planet of the Apes.
That's funny.
So there's also...
What was the TV show? What was the live-action one?
The live-action one, let's... so it's someone crash lands, but it's got a young chimpanzee that is sent by Zaius, Dr. Zaius from the first film, with Urko to ensure the safety of two humans that have survived a crash landing on Earth. And the ape's name is Galen, and he's played by Ronnie Mcdowell in the TV series, which ran for 14 episodes.
I thought it was going to be one like this, where it's like so much of the talent and DNA is still present in this.
Yeah.
Unseen chapter.
And so this show aired in 1974, which is the year after Battle.
And what's it called again?
It's just called Planet of the Apes.
Yeah, that's so interesting. It only went for one season.
14 episodes, and it has a section on the Wikipedia page called Unfilmed Episodes, two of which were episode 1 and episode 2 were written by Rod Serling.
Oh my god, this sounds pretty ripe for a Patreon episode.
There's also a bunch of comics. So the video games as well, I'll just mention as well. There's Planet of the Apes 2001, which is a tie into that film. Revenge of the Apes, which is a game originally developed in 1983 for the Atari 2600. But then Fox shuttered its game division during the great video game crash of 1983. It went unreleased and was assumed lost until 2002, when collectors identified a mislabeled cartridge as the missing Planet of the Apes game, and then it was completed and released in 2003.
That's a cool story. So it's funny, It's almost like a missing link. Hey. It's this is similar to the Terminator series, where I feel like, despite the fact that its sequelage is so prolific, it's also something which like kind of falls apart the more installments you give it. Like, Planet of the Apes found a way out of it, but like Terminator Judgment Day is such an ending to that story that any subsequent sequels like undermines it. And in the same way, I feel like the original Planet of the Apes is so good that any further installments is like, well, okay, yeah, sure. Like, the best we can have is Escape. You know?
Yeah. There's also Planet of the Apes Last Frontier, which takes place between Dawn and War of the reboot trilogy, so I guess that's really more for that. And then there's also Crisis on the Planet of the Apes, which is like a VR experience.
So those are both games.
Yeah. There's also a bunch of comics, and there's been Planet of the Apes comics running like steadily since the early 70s or late 60s kind of thing. There's Tarzan on the Planet of the Apes, which came out in 2016. There's Planet of the Apes Visionaries. What's that one? It's based on the Rod Serling script for the original film. There's Planet of the Apes / Green Lantern, 2017. That's about a combo of those two categories. And there's one called Star Trek / Planet of the Apes, The Primate Directive.
Very good.
Which is a very fun title. Because in Star Trek, they talk about the Prime Directive a lot.
I get it.
Primate.
Yeah.
So that's
Speaking
all fun.
of titles, we didn't talk about titles. Should we do that next week with all of them in one go?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I only really have one thing I want to say about the titles, which is like it's interesting that, and again, we'll talk about it more next week. I do want to talk about the titles with you because you're the title boy. Is that like everyone makes fun of like Rise of the Planet of the Apes? So it's like blank of the blank of the blank of the blank of the blank, and they went like these titles are so ridiculous. It's like they've been around since fucking 1970.
Conquest of the Planet of the Apes is the only one that has two ofs in it, though.
Well, but it's still like blank filler 2 words. Planet of the
Beneath
Apes.
the Planet of the Apes, Escape from the Planet. I think they all work. I think it's when you have something of the something that
Right. Yeah. Sure. Okay.
yeah.
But yeah, the one thing I don't like about these titles, and like they are cool titles, and especially Beneath, we mentioned being like it's not like battle for and like escape from are very like okay, yeah, these are the first ones you'd think of. Yeah, but the one thing I don't like about them is that in your DVD collection, they don't line up. They're not in the right order.
In what way?
Well, so Planet of the Apes is going to be under P, and then you're like, oh, the second one should be right next to it, right? No, it's all the way back at B. And so that's the one kind of thing I don't like about that.
Does
that,
sequeling not trump alphabetical in your collection?
So like, yeah, it depends. Like I've got all of the MCU just like in that order, but it's like separate to that kind of thing. And so if it was like obviously this wouldn't be it, but it was like if it was Planet of the Apes Beneath, Planet of the Apes Escape, Planet of the Apes Conquest, I would still put Escape before Conquest, even though it's not in that alphabetical order kind of thing.
Yeah.
But because the titles are so like drastically doesn't start with that letter kind of thing.
Well, that's why you just get the box set. Shitty titles are a conspiracy made up by big box set to sell more box sets.
Yeah. What do you think of the titles?
I think it's a cool format to go with. I like that they're not just Planet of the Apes too. I think Beneath is probably the only one that I'm like, fuck yeah. But like
it's the worst one.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm not enamored by the other titles. I think the least words you can put in there, it makes it for a better title. So if it was Beneath the Planet of the Apes, beside the Planet of the Apes.
Beneath the Apes. Escape the Apes.
Yeah.
Conquest of the Apes.
Yeah, exactly.
Battle for the Apes. All right, and so part of this podcast, if it is your first time joining us, is that we both pitch a continuation to the franchise, which, like, when we first started this podcast, really felt like it was going to be like a bigger part of it. Back when the episodes were 20 minutes and Continue the Franchise would take up 6 of those minutes. But now it's very much an afterthought. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about what those continuations are. And AJ, have you prepared a continuation of the franchise?
Somewhat. I was thinking, so going off what I said before about how like maybe I would take this more seriously if they weren't apes, and like if you were doing the same concept now, I do wonder if like Planet of the Reptiles would be the way to go. Play into the now very ubiquitous imagery of reptilian overlords. Do you do the same basic story but it's with reptilians instead of apes? I think people would probably take that a bit more seriously.
And it's just the royal family.
Yeah, no, it's just dinosaurs. That sitcom.
Not the mama.
Not the mama. But yeah, that's sort of I reckon if it weren't for the reboot trilogy, I do wonder if this would have been attempted again with like a 21st century twist, which is it's an animal you can take more seriously than apes. Which would be reptilians, I guess. So Planet of the Reptilians or Planet of the Lizards or Planet of the Reptiles is my pitch.
Yeah. All right, my one is set in our world.
Oh my God.
This is like a Human Centipede 2 situation.
Great choice.
Where it's set in our world. It's about your average like kind of kino film enjoyer. Probably loves Zack Snyder, and he doesn't like Planet of the Apes is one of the biggest media franchises of all time, but he doesn't get it.
Right.
So what he does is he invents time travel, travels forward to the Planet of the Apes, and and kind of just points out all the flaws with it because he doesn't really like Planet of the Apes. He thinks it's too good for it. And so, yeah, it's him essentially poking holes in the plot. And then, he would be enslaved, or he would lead the revolution by being like, apes are stupid.
Yeah. Reptiles are way better.
And it's played by you.
Oh, I'll take it.
Finally, it's giving you a gig, man.
Yeah,
and it's called Above the Planet of the Apes because that is what our character is.
Wow. So it's not set in the sky. It's set in this guy points to self.
Yeah, so it's about a guy who thinks he's too good for everything, and he is above the Planet of the Apes.
I love it. Richard, this brings us closer and closer, ever marching, never stopping to the end of the episode. Do we want to rank this episode now or next week?
No, we this is very much a rank the originals, rank the reboot.
Okay, but
but the Almighty Watcher's gonna have your fucking balls for breakfast.
No, we have talked about doing a re-ranking episode, and one of the requests was to stop doing
fucking know or care
at the moment.
Can
we focus on the podcast we're doing instead of one we might do in the future?
I don't. Yeah, this whole thing about why did you count this and not this? To make it 100.
And that didn't even work because we accidentally forgot to include a Cinderella story.
Yeah. I don't know. I think we should just huck it on. That's a problem for future AJ and Richard to worry about.
Okay. Fine.
All right.
Are you on the page or am I doing it?
Yeah, I'm on the wrong list, so I'll just go on to the right one.
Too.
Which one did you go to Covered on Film Franchise?
Yes, I did. Yeah, this is over on our Letterboxd, by the way, letterboxd.com/coldpopture/list. There will be a link to it in the description if you want to read our different lists. Okay, so we currently have on our franchise ranking, we have, how many? It's, 126 franchises. So this will be our 127th franchise.
Yeah. I went on to I was on the wrong list and I went on to what I thought was the right one. It was still the wrong one. So no, I'm now going into the right list. Planet of the Apes. Cool. So I'm adding Planet of the Apes. And so this is just the original Up to Battle, right?
Yeah, I guess we're not including the remake because it didn't have a franchise of its own.
Because we didn't include Death Note last time.
Correct. Yeah.
All right.
And with
is this going to be above or below the Nymphomaniac constant?
I think it's definitely above the Nymphomaniac constant.
All right.
Which is our one good movie, one bad movie marker. I would put it quite considerably higher up than that. I'm looking around. What I'm feeling is Ocean's 11, Friday the 13th area. So maybe not above Ghostbusters at 25, but either in front of or behind Ocean's 11 at 26. What do you think?
All right. I'm just scrolling up to have a look. 27. All right. So not above Ghostbusters, you think?
Or is it above Ghostbusters? Because there's two really good ones in this series, which is more than you can say for Ghostbusters.
Yeah, and I would say, I don't know, even Planet of the Apes, I would say there's no, bad ones.
Yeah, there's no duds. Okay, so should we go above Ghostbusters? Above Ghostbusters is 28 Days Later, which I'm willing to concede this is a better franchise than 28 Days Later. And above that is Jurassic Park, which, Jurassic Park 1's probably the best movie of all of these that we're talking about. But then also as a franchise fails in a lot of ways that I think maybe we need to bump up even further. Let's jump up a few to what, like, I'm looking at Mad Max at 16. What are you thinking there?
Yeah. I think we're finding the place.
Yep.
Is it above or below Mad Max?
I love making this part of the show engaging by having to describe like explicitly numbers and franchises we're looking at. I would say it is not better than the best Mad Max, but I think it's probably better than Mad Max as a whole.
Yeah. Okay, sweet. But it's not as good as Monsters, Inc.
At 15. What do you think?
Fuck, let's chuck it next to Death Note.
Which is it before? I think is it better or worse than Death Note?
I know, but it's fun to be like, oh, we covered two franchises of similar quality at the same time.
So Death Note's at 12, Terminator's at 11. I'm gonna say it is better than Death Note, but not better than Terminator.
Yeah, okay, I can live with it.
Yep. All right, so there you go. For the second time on Film Franchise Fortnights in a row, we now have a 12th best franchise we've ever watched, which is Planet of the Apes, the original series. Fun stuff. And that brings us to the end of the show. We are doing something on our Patreon right now, patreon.com/cultpopture. If you want to check it out.
This is interesting because by the time this episode comes out, it'll be very different from what's happening right now.
Oh, true. That's true. So
if you go over to our Patreon now, what's happening, what we're in the middle of now, what we're talking about is that 2 weeks from now will be the 5-year anniversary of this podcast, of Film Franchise Fortnights, I should say, of the Cult Popture podcast. Be going a little bit longer than that, but it didn't really take off till I joined the team. And so the last couple of years, you might remember, we did a redux of an earlier franchise we covered. The first time we did it in 2019 was Spider-Man, which we were able to add a couple more films that had come out since we originally covered Spider-Man. And last year we did the Freddy vs. Jason, which originally we covered all of A Nightmare on Elm Street and all of Friday the 13th and the crossover film Freddy vs. Jason. And we covered that all in one episode, which was under an hour long. It's like 3 minutes per film, which, we're just doing a 2.5 hour podcast about 6 films in the Planet of the Apes franchise. So we thought we'd give it its due course and check that out. They're very good episodes of the podcast. I re-listened to them recently. But we did an episode on Friday the 13th, an episode on Nightmare on Elm Street, and then an episode about Freddy vs. Jason and the 2 reboots of those franchises. So we thought we'd do it again, but the thing is, we've opened up the voting this year to be any film franchise from our first year or our second year of the franchise, whereas it used to just be our first year.
Be very funny if a first-year franchise is still the winner.
Yeah. But what we've been doing over the last week, which you will have seen if you're already a Patreon member, is we divided these 38 franchises we covered in those first 2 years, and we divided them up into groups, and then had these little round robins of groups of 9 to 10 franchises, and then the 4 winners of those went into a poll. And hey, this is not coming out for quite a while after we're recording it. There might be more than 4. There might have been a tie. We didn't actually say what would happen if there was a tie in one of those. But yeah, if you go onto the Patreon now, you will see at least 4 film franchises that we will be covering after the reboot trilogy, and you can go on there and have your say. I know at least one of them is Jurassic Park. The second one is probably
X-Men at this stage.
Or Twilight. What's winning at the moment?
I think X-Men has got the edge. It currently has the edge. Yeah. Edgemen. Great. Oh, no. You're right. Oh, no, actually, Transformers is winning now.
Transformers, yeah. But hey, that could all change by tomorrow morning, to give you some very specific time as to when we're recording this. But yeah, so go along to our Patreon, www.patreon.com/cultpopture, where you can see what those 4 or maybe more franchises that we will be covering for the second time.
Yes. And furthermore, if you want to support Cult Pop Show and all the other places, we are on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. There are 2 YouTube channels. One's called Cult Pop Show, one's called Cult Pop Show Again, which is where we post this podcast. We're also on Twitter. I'm on TikTok, AJ from Cult Pop Show. There's also Cult Pop Show on TikTok, but that is a abandoned channel. Anyway, and as we said, we've got a Discord and a Patreon as well. Stay tuned for the post-credit scene after this music stops, and stay tuned for next week when we'll be covering Rise, Dawn, and War of/for the Planet of the Apes. Let us know what you thought the best Planet of the Apes movie was, and what you think of our opinions. And do you like us? Like, are we cool? Is that cool?
Yeah. Please give us some validation. Well, just give me validation. AJ gets so much validation.
Stop telling people this. I literally been to counselors because I don't have this. Like, it's the defining.
Oh, we've all been to counselors.
It's the defining struggle of my life is not feeling validated, and somehow you've got on this vibe of telling people I don't need validation.
Well, no, that's the thing, is that you give off a vibe that you need it.
Because I do need it.
So do I!
I'm not saying, but with my cry for validation, I am not invalidating your need for validation.
Well, I feel like that's the only way I can get it. Anyway, I need validation.
That
Please
is
give it
a whole package of things we need to Welcome along, everybody, to the post-credit scene. This is a segment brought to you by our Patreon at the end of the show, where we ask our patrons who donate $5 or more over at patreon.com/cultpopshow to give us something to talk about in this, the post-credit scene. And today's post-credit scene, Richard, it comes from Ben Hayes. Hey, Ben. And he says, "Hey, guys, I was wondering how low budget /indie are you willing to go for film franchise Fortnights? For example, would you count the Channel Awesome Anniversary movies as a viable franchise for the podcast? Love the show. Thank you, Ben. We love you."
Love you, Ben. To that, all I have to say is, what the fuck are you talking about?
Channel Awesome is like YouTube.
What the fuck are you on about?
YouTube budget movies, I guess. I don't know. Yeah. I'm not actually familiar with this specific one. My gut instinct...
Channel Awesome is where Nostalgia Critic is from, right?
Yeah, well, who's not exactly someone I want to watch, to be honest.
Yeah, I never got into Doug Walker, I believe his name is. But now he's cancelled. I don't know.
He's not. I don't think he's real cancelled. He's like... I don't know. I actually have no idea what I'm talking about. This is all to say my gut instinct is probably not. I don't think we'd do the Channel Awesome Anniversary movies as a podcast. But hey, suggest it in the next franchise vote. See what happens. I don't know. I we would probably do. Is there more than one Smosh movie? Like, people have suggested Fred, but these are movies that
Smosh is like. These are like legitimate movies.
Yeah,
I
these
think
are YouTubers who have got movie deals.
Honestly, I don't know if you'd maybe if you'd left more information, we could probably give it more. But yeah, are these actual movies, or are you just talking about are these just quite long YouTube videos? Are they compilations of YouTube? Give us more information, Ben. If these are legitimate movies, they have a narrative and they're over 60 minutes, say, and they have Letterboxd profiles. That's kind of become one of the main things. Then I'd be inclined to say, I don't know that we're necessarily going to add it to the mythical franchise list.
Yeah.
But feel free to suggest it. If you get enough backing behind it, more power to you, man. If a film doesn't have a Letterboxd page, which isn't some wholly fucking unachievable thing, every episode of Black Mirror has one. It's not it's supposed to just be for movies, but there's a bunch of TV shit that has it, and it's similar to IMDb that is user submitted, so you could just make one and then suggest it to us as a franchise. I don't care, but it makes ranking them so much easier if it's on Letterboxd.
And there's your answer, Ben. Hope that was satisfactory. Thank you for being a patron. Goodbye.